start with you in opening up our discussion.
Why?
Gee, I wonder why. Owen, this is cutting edge stuff. I mean, people want to invest in so many different stocks and assets and things all the time, and you've tapped into a real South African need. Tell us or take us back to that moment where the penny dropped that this is what I need to do.
I'm a solutions person. I'm like 1 + 1 must be equal to 2. So if we've got resources and we've got problems, we must find the middle ground and create a solution. So I just, every year we see kids going to the street and they're doing for various things, and accommodation is one of them. For me, it didn't make sense why, for decades that's continued to be the case. And I say, but surely the government has cash or private capital has got money to put into the asset class. So let me investigate this. I got myself into, this researching pattern of looking deeper into local and offshore student accommodation issues. And I discovered that there is a big gap in South Africa for student housing, which is estimated to be anything between 200 and 300,000 beds that are appropriately priced, that are close to the university, that needed to be built. So I continued to investigate, started to talk to more people, and before I knew it, 2 years later, we were on the verge of listing a company on the JSE that was going to accommodate students in the country. But unfortunately, for the collapse of the property market last year in the beginning of the year, we could not proceed with that listing. We decided to shelve it. But that did not mean the problem had gone away. Problem still exists. People are making money out of it, and I've seen some numbers out there where guys make some really decent cash, and I'm not going to talk about the amount of money people are making there because I don't want to push this thing too hard. People know you can make cash in student housing. If you think about it, the government expects you to put 1 student per 8 square meters of your building. But if you look at a normal flat, some of those flats have got 45 square meters. In a 45 square meter flat, you can get, say in Braamfontein, 5,000-6,000 rands in rent. But if you took that flat, maybe you say you've got a 30 odd square meters or 25 odd square meters that you can use, you can create 4 beds for students, and they will not pay you anything less than 3,000.
For us, though, as a board, we'll be dealing with the issues of corporate governance. Obviously, when the investment opportunity comes, it's going to come through the Chief Investment Officer and the Executive Chairman, CEO. It will be submitted to the Investment Committee. Investment Committee is going to appropriately grill those to see that it stands actually the master of the returns on the investment which are expected, and then it will be submitted to the board, and the board will apply its mind, which would actually be a third card. So it's the executives, it's the investment committee, and then the board. After that, for us, we'll be saying again, let's be guided by the investment targets, the impact targets. Are we achieving those? That's what the board is going to do. And when you look at the board is constituted by experienced, balanced, gender, broad-based, and actually it's more women in the board than there are men, but experience and integrity.
Of course, one is guided by, you do form preconceived kind of ideas of where you should look. So you start there. But it definitely, and this is where I think it's really wonderful that we as executives have an investment committee and we have a board, because if our own biases drive us to look towards a certain area or a certain university or a certain type of accommodation, they will be there to say to us, no, but you haven't investigated this area, and we've heard that this particular opportunity is something that you should look at. And that's the advantage for me, and why I think the way that this is set up is very advantageous, and it's different from what I've come across before, where typically executives and chief investment officers tend to make these decisions alone.
And so it's going to definitely be a collective.
Yes.
Absolutely. Kundai, you are somebody that has invested in listed student housing globally, so you understand the bigger picture of where this is going, ISAF, not just the South African picture, but that it's a global phenomenon, the issue of students needing housing. And in South Africa, though, what are some of our unique challenges that you think Ithubalethu is going to be able to meet?
Okay, thank you again. I think I'm always long-winded when I speak, but I'll try and be short. I'll try and be short. But I think it's true that the challenge of purpose-built student accommodation is not just a South African issue, and I think it's pretty prevalent in the US. It's very prevalent in the UK and Australia itself. And those are the markets that maybe we've had a bit more access in terms of avenues of investment, and I'm sure it's true across many countries. And to answer your question more directly, what I do see issues that are maybe more pertinent to South Africa at this point is the gap between need and availability seems wider. So what I'll give as an example of the UK has 1.8 million students. It's got about 700,000 students that come into the market every year, and then there's probably about 400,000 houses or student accommodation that is of decent quality or purpose built. When I look at the numbers in South Africa, the gap is wide, as spoken by Vanessa, that it's almost a factor of maybe 10 to 1. If we say there's 1 million students, there's 100,000 beds provided by the universities, and maybe another 20 or so thousand that are provided by the sector. Purpose built is actually much smaller than that. I just looked, before I came here. There's Campus Key, there's South Point, there's another company called Respublica. Campus Key has 6 campuses, and I think of those, the average is about 1,000 beds. So 6,000, maybe 10,000 beds they have, and they're only about 4 players in this space. And Campus Key is actually mid-level; they're decent operation. So in effect, the gap between the need and the availability of purpose-built accommodation, I think, is biggest in South Africa relative to the markets that I've seen. But another issue I think affecting South Africa is obviously affordability, where the stuff that has been built, purpose-built stuff, is stuff where the students have to pay 5,000 to 6,000 a month, which is obviously more luxury, I would say, relative to what the students can afford. So I think the avenue of wanting to service the underserviced NSFAS market, would call it, or maybe call it affordable market, not necessarily NSFAS, is probably the right strategy. I do hope, and I think the guys will make the numbers work. Obviously, that's why it's difficult. That's why it hasn't been serviced, because it's difficult. But I think that's where maybe some of the great opportunities will be as well.
Thank you very much for that. Tenju, I want to bring you in, and maybe you can bring the mic in, and I think you have another point you want to make. All right, Tenju, the work that's being done by ISAF Ithubalethu on the ground, how do you think it's going to help students on a practical level to know that there's more solutions or there's more alternatives where they can stay, that the issue of housing is starting to be addressed, from the outside, and that there's practical solutions like this that are actually starting to take shape?
Okay, didn't expect that. So, I think for me, having listened to today, I think one of the most useful things about the program is the opportunity for low-income earning people to be able to save up 5,000 Rand to be able to invest in this. For me, that's the most, of everything that I've heard, I've gone, here, people's parents can take ownership and can also invest. I think that's for me is something that matters, because if students aren't interested in your so you could be really cheap, but when protests happen, which happens every single year, it's historical. In previously black institutions, for example, AUKZN, DUT, or institutions that housed black people, the accommodation protest happens at the beginning of every single year. Fees Must Fall was a product of the coconut movement that was fighting for the bigger fee issue, but there is a lack of, and so what we saw in Johannesburg, for example, is we saw a burning down of the South Point buildings because they were ridiculously expensive and things like that. So for me, one of the most interesting things here is that students continue, and we continue to say this, that if without the ownership and without the possibility of just your low income earning person being able to invest in that project, then it's easier for students to have an issue with those. I think outside of that, I mean, by the time that the fees must fall, because that's what Owen spoke about, but by the time that fees must fall, it started, I was on degree number 4 at a 4th different institution and finishing. The issue was not necessarily a lack of accommodation at first, but then when I came in, there was a massive influx of black students who could not afford res. So what then happened is that a lot of the white lecturers would rent out their houses as digs, and that was the movement. Digs are not safe because there's no security guards. I did my next degree, my law degree at UKZN in Maritzburg, and there was a serious issue of private accommodation only ever being in the city of Pietermaritzburg and not close to Scottsville. And at the time, we dealt with a lot of rape issues, and we've continued to deal with those issues just with how the university is. In Johannesburg, then I went to Cape Town. In Cape Town, the issue there was just how expensive living in Cape Town is. So everybody would go for South Point, for example, as one of the cheapest options, but the students would actively, every single protest, we would remember to go to South Point because it is the cheapest, but also our parents can't afford it. So we would take out a lot of our frustrations at South Point residences. In Johannesburg, it is safety. One of the key issues is safety moving in and around Johannesburg, and because I am now a professional student and piece, when parents ask, and you meet a lot of this when you're when parents going off campus as a lecturer, as a whatever, as a black lecturer, where do you say that they must go? And you just go the library, because I don't trust Joburg, and because of the rape cases that we've had around that. So for me, the two things, it is one, the idea of affordability, but two, it is this thing of, even I'm imagining even students being able to, or myself as obviously not a suit, but people who are not suits and capitalists being able to invest in this thing for the future of their children going. So I have a child. Is he going to go to university? Probably not, because he just wants to twerk. But if he wants to, so it is my brain goes, if my child did want to go to university, for me in the long term to start to say, so if I'm investing in something that is going to give me a turn, so that when he gets to university, I don't have to stress as my parents had been and as I continue to see parents. So that for me is one of the things that I'd go out, me personally, I'd go, yo, this is an investment opportunity on this basis, because of the ideas of ownership and just normal black people being able to have assets that continue to make them money. Oh yeah. By the show of hands, we do have one hand that I'm noting here. We do have number 2 there at the back, the lady in the black blouse. I've noted 2 hands. And the gentleman up here, thank you very much. Number 3, I've noted you. And number 4, the lady with the black and white blouse, thank you, I've noted you. And would you please introduce yourself and then perhaps just say, which particular panelist, or just your question in general?
Good afternoon, good evening. I'm the CEO of Traverse Advisory and one of Inkunzi investors. Hi, Owen.
Hello, sir.
How's it, bro? Yeah. Well, my question, Owen, is around that 12J issue and the fact that it's a little bit misunderstood and that 2021 cutoff. So what does it mean from a tax relief point of view as an investor?
All right, thank you. I'm going to take all the questions and then come back to our panelists to respond. Number 2, the lady in the black blouse at the back.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Bridget. I was interested in this seminar, for lack of a better word, when my partner actually proposed I come tonight. And firstly, I must commend Tenjiwe. I liked your comment because one thing this brings to us as public sector people is the inclusion. And student accommodation is always an exclusive issue where, as you mentioned, South Point, it's for rich and prominent and students that can afford. But what about students that cannot afford? So the inclusion of their parents, the public, to invest in the well-being and a purposeful environment for their kids. That's one thing that I alluded from your comment as well. Now, opening up my questions to the panel. It's not specific for anybody. Any panelist can answer this. But I just wanted to understand, taking forward Vanessa's presentation from the way forward, what is, for us investors or prospective investors, what are you looking for or your selling point in terms of the roadmap that you're taking? And I speak to timelines because for me, money is a scarce commodity, but investment is a long-term thing, which is something that's pulling me towards this. So how do you try to sell to me in terms of the roadmap and the timelines? Where am I looking in terms of the timelines and investing in this sort of thing? And my second question is basically, which universities have you earmarked or are in possible communication with?
So my question is also like on the time frame. You were talking about if maybe you were to have money like tomorrow, you will start by maybe starting with consulting like the universities and stuff and also the building. So I wanted to know, like, in terms of the time spent, what are you really looking for? If maybe we were to say maybe you're gonna raise that 230 million by the end of this year, how will we maybe know that, okay, by investing, this is the returns that we're gonna get, probably after how long, and maybe something like how much percentage of it we're gonna get from that. Thank you.
Obviously, we're starting this with nothing. I mean, there's nothing there's not an existing portfolio at the moment, so it's important to understand that. I think it's very important that I mention that whatever funds we collect goes into a deposit account at Investec, where it will be earning, Owen, correct me if I'm wrong, 7.95%.
Yeah, 7.95.
So it's you don't put your money in and it earns nothing. You put your money in, it goes into Investec where it earns interest at 7.95%. So, and that money will stay there up until we reach our subscription goal and or we find a suitable investment to invest in. Now, in terms of the timing, obviously if we buy an existing building, there will be a yield immediately that we could distribute at the end of the financial year, the very next financial year. If we decide to develop something, obviously it will take longer because the development might take 10 months or even 12 months to complete, which means there will be a period of time where there will be no earnings. Obviously, in terms of the investment case, it would have to make sense. The investment committee and the board would have to approve it, which would mean that the development opportunity would have to yield a lot better than the existing building would in order for it to be a superior investment. And that's basically, it will be compared on a purely return basis from that point of view, just in terms of answering this question. It's very difficult for me to give a timeline exactly when we will invest in what. At the moment, people have come to us, they've given us opportunities, showed us things that we can invest in. There are already a couple of opportunities on our desk that look quite promising, but obviously we don't want to speculate or get ahead of ourselves. We want to make sure that we get the right thing and then go forward with the best that we can. I think one of the questions was what would happen if we're undersubscribed. I think Owen can also answer that question.
Again, thank you, Vanessa, and thank you everyone for the questions. So I'll just help and add some more points on top of what Vanessa has said. The 12J expiry, I think maybe let me explain what the 12J is. Section 12J is an act created to benefit individuals and companies who will invest money in ventures like this one, where if you invest any, let me give you an example. Say if you invest 100,000 into a venture like this one, and you're supposed to pay tax of 100,000. I don't want to get too technically complicated with tax, because I'm sure there are tax experts here. They might expose me. And importantly, I want to simplify it enough so that people understand. So if you're supposed to pay 100,000 rands in tax, but instead you choose to invest in a 12J investment opportunity, that tax you would have paid, you then get it back from SARS, and that has been happening over the past few years, which is a big tax benefit from my perspective. It helps you enhance your returns. It already means that you're going into this investment and you have started making money as long as you stay in the investment for a period of 5 years. Uhambo is to take us to a point where we have a balance sheet. When we sit with someone who owns a building, with someone who owns a piece of land, we are speaking from a very strong position. We've got 250 million in the bank, and the 250 million, we go to the bank, we ask for additional debt facilities, we get another 250, we have 500 million rands, and at 500 million rands we can deliver 300,000 beds depending on our pricing. But here is what I need all of you to understand. We could not list because we had exclusivity arrangements on the left with these vendors or these sellers of these buildings, and this side we're looking for money. But we could not find the cash on time. Other people found the cash and they went to bid for the assets that we wanted to buy. But if I sit here with money in the bank, in the investor account that Vanessa is talking about, earning a nice interest rates, which obviously will move with the rest of the interest rate cycle that we're going through, you probably are getting 3, 4, 5% wherever you've invested your money if it's in a call account. But we've been asked well enough to say, for our investors, let's talk to Investec, a big balance sheet. No VPS surprises will be expected there. So we think that putting your cash there, even if we spend time looking for these opportunities diligently, your money will be making you some returns. So my starting point is to have money in the bag, and if we have money, me and Vanessa will go out there and look for those opportunities, and we believe that it's not going to take us a long time to assemble a portfolio. There are assets. There is an asset in Stellenbosch that is being shown to us. It's worth 100 million. If we wanted to buy that asset for income generating asset and to create a balance sheet that's backed by an asset, we could look at that asset. We'll just need to raise about 1/3 to 50% of that asset. And again, talking about the minimum capital we need to raise 50 million rands for this capital raise to be deemed successful, and that's a self-imposed limit. CIPC asked me, what should your minimum be? And I said, I trust that people will support this thing because they've supported Mr. Vivian Reddy, who raised about 150 million rands in 4 months to build that hotel in Umhlanga. Why should they not support this thing that's going to change the lives of students and ultimately the lives of South Africa in future? So we gave ourselves a 50 million rand minimum, and I speak to you, we're busy going through the paces with one investor who wants to give us 20 million rands. He has committed. He said, if you have an asset and you want to buy the asset, I am bringing to the table 20 million rands, which essentially means we just need 30 odd million rands to cover that gap. And I'm hoping after tonight we will, with your big paychecks. And importantly, guys, I think that what we want to do, we want to change the landscape. You're not changing the landscape by buying an existing building. You're just giving someone who developed that asset money. Let us build new assets so that we're reducing the number of children who are looking for beds. That's a better way to spend money. And I'm not in any way saying that that's the guaranteed return we'll give you, but I've seen returns of between 20 and 80% on assets that have been built in 1 year. But we'll be very cautious, we'll be very conservative. We don't want to be setting unnecessary expectations that we will not be able to meet. So the timelines to build an asset, we have lined up decent builders, guys, constructors and developers, people who have been developing for years. You will like their names when we mention those names. What is important for us is the fact that they can deliver, they have a track record, they understand the asset class, and those are the people who we are going to work with. If you can look at the people that I've chosen to work with, it's people that have sector experience, and I think that that's how we will That's how we'll make sure that our project does deliver on the promises that we make to you as our investors. And I'm hoping that I think I've covered quite a few of those and of the points that you raised. And then you spoke about a balance sheet. This is a spec. It's an empty shell. You're collecting money, going to look for opportunities. We have identified opportunities, like I have said. The balance sheet you see in that book, we do not want to predict it going out to 1 year because we don't know which assets we'll have chosen to buy, right? So we can't. But I can tell you now, if you give me 250 million rands today, in the next month we would have got into exclusivity arrangements, and in 2 more months we close out the transactions and buy existing assets if the shareholders vote that we must buy existing assets. But I think perhaps a compromise would be to buy some existing assets, but to focus on developing new assets for the country.
All right, thank you very much. Just coming back to the panel, we'll start with Sinigi, where they're wanting to know more clarity for, how the money is being raised. And I think, Owen, you've covered some of those. Sedation wanting to know how much is the board earning, what's in it for you guys. I think Begi will answer that question. And also his second question around the financial model, that he needed more clarity on that. And there was a question on why is the asset or the project not underwritten, and how are you going to deal with those issues? And Tlantla also raising issues of protecting the assets, and also how, given the fact that you're going to be building, how are you going to be looking at what's happening around the land issues? So that's just really what the audiences would like to know at this stage. Perhaps Begi, you also wanted to deal with issues of the board and remuneration as per sedation.
When one looks at the board members, I think we have not spoken about this as broadly as probably we could, but the board members are going to be encouraged to participate as well. Participate, though, in such a manner that their independence is not impaired. Normally, people, when they invest less than 10% of their net worth, they are seen to continue to be independent. And therefore, for them, they are going to be the returns which are going to be comparable to any other investor. But we will really look at that. And thirdly, when one looks at the board fees really compared to what the directors could be earning in the listed companies or private companies, the fees which are being paid are very nominal, really seriously nominal. And I would like to leave it to Owen to cover that. And therefore, it is more the commitment that the project is the right project, and certainly they are going to get some dividends, or rather, not dividends, rather the board fees. However, it is to say as well they are going to be investors.
Owen, over to you.
Thank you, Sato. So, can I just add that the board that we have, guys, most of the guys are there because they want to be a part of the cause for helping create a solution for students' housing. We've been working with them for the past, I think it's almost 7 odd months. We have done lots of meetings, and can I tell you, they've said, let's waive our fees. We were not taking any fees right now until we raise the capital. Only then are we going to start getting paid. And I think big hand to the board for that, guys. They've sacrificed their time for us to get to where we are. And then the issue of the shares that have already been issued. I think you're talking about the shares issued to the directors and founders. So there's a part that talks about the price that those shares were issued at. Those are initial founder fees for myself and for Vanessa. It's incentives to keep us in the business. Vanessa, there's a lot of companies out there that could just come and scoop her, but we had to be incentivized fairly. And I think in the same breath, we looked around and we did a market-related survey to see what guys doing the kind of work we are doing are incentivized as. And I think that we reached those share issues. They are being issued at relatively nominal numbers. But it's incentives to make sure that me and Vanessa can drive this engine and get it to where it needs to be. And importantly, we don't find ourselves being attracted by other people out there. And the question around remuneration has been tackled. The returns when you talk about alternative returns for the investors, I think this is the first time that a structure is being created where investors can benefit from two tiers of income, which is the development revenues. Picture this: we develop an asset, we're gonna have a second company that runs the operations, which is the opco of our business. ISAF Ithubalethu is developing assets on the one side. If we're buying an income generating asset, we put it on the second company, where the combined economic benefit of those belongs to our shareholders. So any development upside we generate from the first company goes to the people who have invested in this structure. So, like I said, this is a blended company. I want to make sure when we're making money through development, you get to benefit. What I could have done is raise this cash and taken this cash and created a vehicle on the right side that buys stuff that we have developed this side, myself and maybe Kunda or someone else out there. So we created development this side and then we sell it here. You just benefit from income returns. And then we keep the development income that I spoke about. That I said it ranges from anything between 20% and in some instances 80%. But again, because we'll have both our hands in the two pies, it means we will have having vested interest on both sides of the pie means we need to price things correctly. None of the sides of the businesses is going to struggle because of the one side needing to benefit. Ultimately, everyone is a beneficiary, and I hope that then the rental income that gets generated is the other income. There is other things you can do with buildings. You can put brands on them and develop marketing strategies, charge people cash for using your buildings, and the strategic location of the buildings we will be bringing up. I think we'll take into cognizance maybe some of those opportunities. We could sell some marketing space to guys. And for example, if we do build in Durban and we build a nice asset, one could also use it as a holiday income when the students are on leave. So there is lots of opportunities for us to create income. And down the line, we'll do a whole lot of other things as well. And I think the next one is around the underwriting of the offer. Underwriting of an offer is when someone says we're looking to raise 100 million rands, go out to the market, try and raise 100. If you don't, I'll come in and I'll give you cash. There's obviously economic benefits to whoever gives you that underwriting, but in an economy like this one, where the biggest balance sheets are not sitting in our hands, it'll be very difficult to get someone to come and underwrite our offer. It doesn't matter how noble the idea is, people still have their preferences, and I think that we want to depend on ourselves. And as I said earlier, the money is going to be invested in a trust account. Should we not succeed, the cash goes back to you. And as I've said as well, when we look at an asset and we think it's worth deploying cash into this asset, we would have done a lot of research, a lot of due diligence work would have gone into it. I've seen people who've got cash from wherever doing deals. Trust me, over the past 3 years, the kind of due diligence I've done, I could safely say that I've got a master's degree in doing due diligence and in student housing. So before we apply our capital to any assets, we would have done our homework, and I don't think that there's any risk that lies that the shareholders need to worry about for investing cash in here. Mr. Takulia sitting there, you can take his phone number. If you think that something has gone wrong, just call him. As long as he's in charge of the audit committee, I think you've got access to him. We want to be transparent, guys. I know it's going to be difficult to run a business on the clean side of things, but I think we've run our other business over the past 7-8 years since I left City Group with integrity, and that's what I want to continue to do. It's a problem running a business in your toilet. See these darkies, see what they're doing. We're trying to avoid that. We're trying to run a proper corporate that can be a global player in future, guys.
Obviously, you have the rental income, which Owen earlier said, we try to aim for 10% yields there. If we develop, then obviously the return would have to be higher, say 12 or 13%. Obviously then there's the capital appreciation as well. Now, unfortunately, in a private fund, you won't be able to access this capital appreciation until after quite some time. But it is our intention to eventually list, to grow the company to such an extent that we eventually list it. And at that point, you would realize very substantial capital appreciation, and would obviously be in line with whatever the yield is. So if your yield is 10%, your capital appreciation will also be 10%.
Our panelists are still available. Some of our board members are also here. You're more than welcome to engage them. But let me take the opportunity to thank each and every one of you for coming here tonight. Please don't go without touching base with Owen and all his board members. If you need any other further clarification, I'm sure they'll be able to engage you further. And thank you so much for joining us, and thank you very much to you, Sister Njiwe, as well, coming through and sharing your personal experience. Ladies and gentlemen, dinner is going to be served out the building to your right again, straight into the main reception area. And Owen?
Oh, sort of as a good question, a very good one actually.
Yes.
He's asking where do the guys submit their forms after they complete them when they leave here?
To Owen.
Yeah, there's Tando at the back there, Charlie. Do you guys want to come forward? Some people have been talking to you on the phone. Come this side, guys, so they can see you. All right, guys. So these are my colleagues. I'll start with Charlie here. You've been speaking to Charlotte, I think. Some of you that have been confirming and sending some of your application forms. Some of you have started giving us cash already. And this is Tando Jangase, and this is Upalesa. Palesa is also part of our call center. Unfortunately, Spusiso could not join us. He's not well today. Lorraine is managing the fort while we are here. And I really appreciate the support these guys have given me. I know it wouldn't have been easy if they were not here. So these are the people to whom you submit your forms. These are the people that will call you tomorrow to find out how you are going to support this journey. Uhambo, we need to make it work, and please feel free to share the prospectus with other people. If you've got any other ideas and other people you think we must talk to, we would appreciate to hear from you and to get that information. Otherwise, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.